Hi everyone, and welcome to my presentation. I will be telling you guys today about Robert Koch. Okay, so Robert Koch is considered to be one of the modern fathers of bacteriology. He was born on December 11th of 1843 in Germany. His father was a mining engineer, and he really amazed his parents at the age of 5 by telling them that he had taught himself how to read with newspapers. This accomplishment really foreshadowed his intelligence. In 1862, when he was 19, he went to the University of Göttingen to study medicine. In 1866, Robert Koch then graduated with an MD degree and went to Berlin for 6 months and studied chemistry. Koch continued his experimental work on bacteriology and serology, and he came under the influence of Rudolf Virchow, who is known today as the father of modern pathology. The following year, in 1867, he settled as assistant in the General Hospital at Hamburg, Germany, in general practice. 3 years later, in 1870, he volunteered for service in the Franco-Prussian War, and from 1872 to 1880, he was district medical officer. So during that time, anthrax was widespread among the farm animals. If you don't know what anthrax is a serious infectious disease caused by gram-positive broad-shaped bacteria known as Bacillus anthracis. So Koch didn't really have any scientific equipment, and his lab was the 4-room flat. That was his home, and the equipment that he did have, he provided for himself. So earlier the anthrax bacillus has been discovered by German scientists Polender, Rayer, and Davy. And so Robert Koch set himself to prove scientifically that this bacillus is in fact the cause of the disease. So what he did, he injected mice with anthrax bacilli taken from the spleens of farm animals that had died of anthrax, and found that these mice were all killed by the bacilli, whereas mice injected at the same time with the blood from the spleens of healthy animals did not suffer from the disease. So this confirmed the work of others who had shown of the disease that can be transmitted by means of the blood of animals suffering from anthrax. Although it is rare, people can get sick with anthrax if they come in contact with infected animals or contaminated animal products. Tuberculosis was Koch's next discovery in 1882. So tuberculosis is a potentially serious infectious bacterial disease, usually caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, that mainly affects the lungs. So Koch discovered the tubercle bacillus and also a method of growing it in pure culture. In 1882, he published his classical work on this bacillus. He pursued to capture the disease, which he called tuberculin, made from cultures of tubercle bacilli. He made 2 preparations of this kind, called the Old and the New Tuberculin, and his first communication on the Old Tuberculin stirred considerable controversy. Unfortunately, the healing power that Koch claimed for his preparation was greatly exaggerated, and because hopes raised by it were not fulfilled, opinion went against it and against Koch. In 1896, the new tuberculin was announced by Koch, and the curative value of this also was disappointing. But it led to the discovery of substances of diagnostic value. Koch came to the conclusion that the bacilli that cause human and bovine tuberculosis are not identical, and his statement of this view at the International Medical Congress on Tuberculosis in London in 1901 caused much controversy and opposition, but it is now known that Koch's new view was the right one. His work on typhus led to the idea that this disease is transmitted much more often from man to man than from drinking water, as is cholera, which we will learn next. and this led to new control measures. As I said before, cholera is usually spread through contaminated water. It's a bacterial disease that usually causes severe diarrhea and dehydration. In 1883, Robert Koch went to Egypt as leader of the German Cholera Commission to investigate an outbreak of cholera. In that country, here he discovered the vibrio that causes cholera and brought back pure cultures of it to Germany. He found a bacillus in the intestinal mucosa in persons who died of cholera, but not of other diseases. He reasoned that the bacillus was related to the cholera process, but was not sure if it was causal or consensual. He stipulated that the time sequence could only be resolved by isolating the organism, growing it in pure culture, and reproducing a similar disease in animals. He was not able to obtain such a pure culture, but did try to infect animals with choleric material, then became infected. In late 1883, Koch requested authorization for his team to sail to Calcutta, India, to continue their work. The epidemic had subsided in Egypt, but was still very active in India, and the team continued their research work. On January 7th of 1884, Koch announced in a dispatch that he was successfully isolated the bacillus in pure culture. 1 month later, he wrote again, stating that the bacillus was not straight like other bacilli, but a little bent like a comma. He also noted that the bacillus was able to proliferate in moist soiled linen or damp earth, and was susceptible of drying and weak acid solutions. Finally, he pointed out that the specific organisms were always found in patients with cholera, but never in those with diarrhea from other causes, but were extensively present in the characteristics of rice water stools of advanced cholera patients. He was, however, still unable to reproduce the disease in animals, reasoning correctly that they are not susceptible. In May 1884, Koch and his colleagues returned to Berlin, where they were treated as national heroes. So after those discoveries, Koch came up with these postulates. There's 4 criteria that were established by Robert Koch to identify the causative agent of a particular disease. These include 1. The bacteria must be present in every case of the disease. 2. The bacteria must be isolated from the host with the disease and grown in pure culture. 3. The specific disease must be reproduced when a pure culture of the bacteria is inoculated into a healthy, susceptible host. And 4. The bacteria must be recoverable from the experimentally infected host. So Robert Koch was a recipient of many prizes and medals. He was awarded the honorary doctorates of the universities of Heidelberg and Bologna. He was awarded the honorary citizenship of Berlin, Wolsten, and where he was born, Klausthal. He was awarded honorary memberships of learned societies and academics in Berlin, Vienna, Posen, Persia, Naples, and New York. He was also awarded the German Order of the Crow and the Grand Cross of the German Order of the Red Eagle, which was the first time this high distinction was awarded to a medical man. In 1905, Robert Koch is awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. He was awarded this for his investigations and discoveries in relation to tuberculosis. In 1910, Robert Koch dies. 2 years later, in 1912, on the 30th anniversary of his discovery of the tuberculosis bacterium, the Institute, Royal Prussian Institute for Infectious Diseases, is renamed to Robert Koch Institute, which during the founding years from 1891 to 1904, the institute was headed by Robert Koch. This institute is a German federal government agency and research institute responsible for disease control and prevention. It is very comparable to the CDC in the United States, and it focuses its attention on public health, and it is one of the oldest biomedical institutions of its kind worldwide.